Yugoslavia, 1943. The war in the Balkans has become a war without mercy. German troops, joined by Croatian and other Axis forces, fight not only against the partisans of Tito's Communist Party, but also against the civilians who feed and shelter them. Each ambush brings brutal reprisals. Villages are burned, hostages are shot, and families are driven from their homes. German reports call these actions anti-partisan operations, but in reality, they are massacres. The countryside turns into a landscape of ruins, where terror replaces order and every civilian learns to fear the sight of German uniforms. Among the divisions sent to carry out this campaign is a new formation of Croat volunteers and German officers, the 369th Croatian Infantry Division, known by its grim nickname, the Devil's Division. Its reputation for cruelty spreads wherever it marches, leaving fire and death in its wake. Leading it with cold precision and unbending obedience is a German general, Fritz Neidholdt. Fritz Neidholdt was born on the 16th of November 1887 in the quiet Thuringian village of St. Kilian, then part of the German Empire. His father, a Protestant pastor, taught him the values of discipline and obedience, and the boy grew up in a home of regular prayers and firm rules. Yet, Fritz's imagination was caught less by the church than by the army. The sight of uniforms and order, of rank and command, appealed to him more than the priesthood ever could. On the 30th of August 1907, not yet 20, Fritz Neidholdt joined the German army. It was a time when the German Empire still stood proud and confident, and young men like him believed service to the Kaiser and the German Empire was the highest honor a life could offer. Neidholdt began his military career at the 96th Regiment of the 7th Division of the Thuringian Infantry, which was part of the German army. In the ranks of this unit, Neidholdt began to learn the trade of soldiering through drill, marching, and started to climb through the army ranks. When the First World War broke out in August 1914, Neidholdt went to the front with his men. They fought first in Belgium, near the city of Namur, and later was sent with his unit to the Eastern Front. During the war years, he served on a various posts in the field, but also doing staff work at military headquarters. During the First World War, he was wounded and received various military awards such as the Knight's Cross of the Royal Saxon Order of Albrecht with swords, and both classes of the Iron Cross. When the war ended in the German defeat, Neidholdt stayed in the army of the newly founded Weimar Republic. The German Empire was gone. The monarchy had fallen, but the habit of obedience remained. He served quietly through the 1920s and was one of the many officers who neither questioned nor resisted the shifting politics of Weimar Germany. He was no visionary, only a man of the army. Methodical, precise, and entirely devoted to command in the small army which was limited by the Versailles Treaty to 100,000 men. But Neidholdt stayed in the German army long enough to see the small Reichswehr, which was the professional army of the Weimar Republic, transform again into the growing Wehrmacht of Hitler's new regime, which came into power in January 1933. On the 21st of May 1935, after seeing the revival of the German army, Neidholdt retired, perhaps hoping for peace. Yet peace never came. In December 1938, as Germany successfully rearmed, Neidholdt was recalled to active duty. When the Second World War started, on the 1st of September 1939, he was again in the field, and at the end of September 1939, he was a commander of the 322nd Infantry Regiment stationed in conquered Poland. At the end of 1939, he moved with the regiment to the Western Front, and later led his soldiers in an assault during the Western Campaign, which started on the 10th of May 1940. After successful victory over France, Neidholdt and his unit were placed on a military leave. but they were called up again in the March of 1941. In the summer of that year, they participated in the German attack against the Soviet Union. For his actions in the first part of the Second World War, he was awarded the German Cross in Gold, a military decoration given in a case of repeated exceptional acts of bravery and troop leadership. In June 1942, he went away from his former unit and was sent to the Führerreserve, awaiting his next command. The next assignment arrived on the 1st of September 1942, when he was given command of the 369th Croatian Infantry Division, a new unit formed under German authorities from volunteers of the independent state of Croatia, a brutal fascist puppet state known also as an Ustasha regime. The division, which was created in the town of Stockerau in Austria, drew from some of the remains of the 369th Croatian Reinforced Infantry Regiment, which had been used by Germans on the Eastern Front and later was destroyed at Stalingrad. Its men came from villages and towns under the Croatian Ustasha regime, its officers from the German army. They took the nickname of the unit as Teufels Division, meaning the Devil's Division, borrowed from an Austro-Hungarian division formed by the Croat soldiers that had fought in the First World War. This new Devil's Division would earn its name again, but this time not for courage, but for cruelty. At first, the unit was meant to be sent to the Eastern Front, but instead it was sent to Yugoslavia, where partisan resistance was spreading like fire through the mountains. Entire villages were burned, livestock stolen, and men, women, and children executed as collective punishment. In early 1943, Neidholdt's men entered the Balkans as part of Operation Vice, the massive Axis offensive against Tito's partisans in Bosnia. The terrain was wild, the partisans invisible, and the enemy's faces looked similar to those of local peasants and villagers. Frustrated by ambushes and heavy losses, Neidholdt's division struck back against civilians with savage reprisals. Villagers suspected of helping the partisans were burned. Eyewitnesses and post-war investigations documented mass killings, rape, and destruction of civilian homes. German reports praised the division's discipline, but Yugoslav memory spoke mainly about the brutal attacks, the fire, and the screams of the civilians. In the next offensive, nicknamed this time Fall Schwarz, or Case Black, members of the 369th Division fought across Montenegro and southern Bosnia. Neidholdt's men again formed the hard center of the German offensive against partisans, and their reputation for brutality only grew stronger. The Devil's Division, under Neidholdt's command, left behind a trail of death wherever they went. Neidholdt's command in the Balkans brought him little glory. Slowly but steadily was war in the Balkans turning against the occupiers. Italy had surrendered to the Allies in September 1943. The German armies were stretched thin over the region, and partisan control over the Balkan territory was growing. The 369th Division remained in the field, carrying out sweeps and reprisals that hardened into routine. On the 11th of September 1944, Neidholdt issued one of his last terrible orders. His men surrounded the villages of Zagniezde and Udora near the city of Stolac in southern Herzegovina. More than 100 men were murdered, and women and children were forced out of their homes, and the villages were left in ruins. By October 1944, the front in the Balkans was collapsing. The Red Army was advancing from the east, the partisans from the south. Neidholdt resigned his command and once again went to a Führerreserve after he came back to Germany. Before the end of the war, he went again through various military posts, and when Germany surrendered on the 8th of May 1945, he was arrested by the Allied troops. The Allies extradited him to Yugoslavia in early 1947. In Belgrade, a special court convened for what became known as the Fourth Yugoslav War Crimes Trials Proceedings, which took place between the 5th and 16th of February 1947. Alongside Neidholdt stood 6 other senior German officers: Alexander Löhr, Josef Köbler, Johann Fortner, Adalbert Lonschar, Günther Tribukeit, and August Schmidhuber. They represented the hierarchy of the German occupation in the Balkans, men who had commanded over whole regions, divisions, and armies, and ordered brutal acts of revenge against the civilian population. The court heard testimony from witnesses who had survived the massacres done by Croats and Germans. They spoke of the hangings and shootings, of the fires that lit the night sky, of families wiped out without warning. Reports captured from German headquarters confirmed that the killings had been ordered as reprisals, and that Neidholdt had signed the papers himself. He did not deny that civilians were executed, but insisted he had acted within the laws of war and under orders from his superiors. His voice remained firm and calm, the voice of an officer who still believed that duty and obedience could justify anything. The judges were not persuaded by his arguments. On the 16th of February 1947, Neidholdt and his co-defendants were found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. All were sentenced to death. Appeals for clemency were rejected by the Yugoslav government. The condemned men were told they would be executed within the next weeks, all except Löhr, by hanging. When Neidholdt was hanged as a war criminal on the 5th of March 1947, he was 59 years old. Before we end today's story, take a look at worldhistory.tv, your special destination for true history lovers. Discover exclusive documentaries and incredible stories you won't find anywhere else. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.